Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expresses hope that US brokered peace talks in next week in Geneva will be serious and substantive, but voiced concern that Ukraine was being asked too often to make concessions. In a push for stronger ties across the Atlantic, Prime Minister of Britain Keir Starmer declares the UK needs deeper links with Europe, signalling a potential shift in post-Brexit relations. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasizes transatlantic unity, stating the US and Europe belong together amid ongoing global challenges facing the Western alliance. Following a major political victory in Bangladesh, BNP leader Tariq Rahman calls for national unity after his party's win, urging reconciliation in the divided nation. Russia, China and Iran held a new round of consultations in Vienna to discuss Iran's nuclear program. Meanwhile, the talks precede next week's International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors session. The US Military Southern Command conducted its second boat strike in a week, killing 3 suspected drug smugglers in the Caribbean, as this brings the death toll to 133 in 39 strikes. According to European Union observers, Bangladesh's 2026 parliamentary election, which saw the Nationalist Party BNP win a landslide, were credible and competently managed. European Union Observer Team Chief said the vote marked a pivotal step towards restoring democratic governance and the rule of law in Bangladesh. US President Donald Trump threatened to bypass Congress and issue an executive order to enforce voter ID laws ahead of the midterm elections. However, the proposed law has faced strong opposition in the Senate. All right, viewers, now 5 European countries that include Britain, France, Germany, Sweden and the Netherlands have confirmed that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was poisoned with a lethal toxin. The governments, in a joint statement released today, concluded that analysis of Navalny's samples identified epibetadine as the cause of his death. This is reportedly a deadly neurotoxin and is not naturally found in Russia, suggesting deliberate poisoning. Alexei Navalny, who died in 2020 while imprisoned in a Russian penal colony, was known for his strong opposition to Russian President Vladimir Putin's government. The 5 governments have argued that Russia had the means, motive and opportunity to carry out the poisoning. Additionally, the European governments have pointed out Russia's repeated disregard for international law, particularly the Chemical Weapons Convention. Meanwhile, in a statement posted on X, Yulia Navalnaya, Alexei's wife, has expressed her gratitude to the European states for uncovering the truth around her husband's death. Let's now welcome Mr. Raymond Vickery, International Affairs expert, former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce. In this discussion, he joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Vickery, for joining us. It's good to see you here at NewsX World. Mr. Vickery, how do you respond to these 5 nations now coming together on the second year, of the pressing of charges, and the almost 6 years after Navalny was poisoned?
Well, thanks very much for allowing me to comment on this. It seems to me that the actions of the 5 nations in Western Europe are an indication that they are not willing to rely on the United States of America any longer for leadership in regard to Russia and the threat that it poses to Western Europe, most recently exemplified, of course, by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You know, in order to wage peace, just like you wage war, you have to have a strategy, you have to have partners, and you have to have principles. Unfortunately, the United States has abdicated this role under President Trump. We do not have an overall strategy. The ability to work with partners, in spite of what Secretary Rubio is saying, has been very, very much damaged by the whole Greenland situation. And indeed, President Trump's view of Putin, that he is able to have a real estate style transaction which will solve problems when the supposed two great men get together and then they make the decisions. It seems to me that the actions of these five nations show that Western Europe is not willing to rely on the United States. The United States isn't bringing up anything about Navalny or chemicals. President Trump wants to have a deal done, just as you would for real estate in Queens, New York. That approach does not work, and it remains to be seen, though, whether or not that all of Western Europe is going to be able to pull together to have a unified strategy and to have a broad enough partnership to be able to move forward, because the United States is the essential nation because of the nuclear umbrella which it holds. So this is an indication to me that the split is continuing and is indicative that the United States needs to get back to having a common strategy with its NATO partners, and it needs to act upon principle rather than just what's in it for me right now.
All right, as far as Russia is concerned, do you think the government can be held accountable over Navalny's death?
Well, the attempt is to hold the Russian government accountable through international means. Obviously, there is no way to hold the perpetrators accountable within Russia itself. But one of the interesting developments lately has been Russians who are in opposition to Putin rejoining and becoming more active in regard to organizations which look toward the peace and security of all of Europe. So it should not be seen that Putin is necessarily Russia, just as it shouldn't be seen that President Trump is necessarily the United States of America. There are democratic factions within Russia who are becoming more active with their counterparts in Western Europe, and it is to be hoped that democratic factions in all of these countries are going to draw together and act upon principles of non-aggression, democracy, rule of law, which are firmly established in the United Nations Charter, rather than succumbing to the Trump administration approach of not trying to hold the Russian government accountable, but really just trying to make a deal in which the administration comes out with a supposed victory.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Vikri, for your comment here, but I request you to stay on with me for further discussions as well. Viewers, now NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte has clarified that no European country is seeking to replace the US nuclear umbrella. Rutte has emphasized that while discussion on strengthening nuclear deterrence within Europe are ongoing, no one is trying to replace the US as the ultimate guarantor of security. This comes after German Chancellor Friedrich Merz revealed that he had held confidential talks with French President Emmanuel Macron about enhancing European nuclear deterrence. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer also confirmed that Britain is enhancing its nuclear cooperation with France. The debate over increasing nuclear capabilities in Europe comes amid growing concerns about Russia's threats and the reliability of US security commitments under Donald Trump. Mr. Vickery requested to join us back in this discussion. Of course, US is crucial not just for NATO but also European Union. But how do we see this statement just as later today? Keir Starmer has said that UK also needs to have stronger links with Europe. So there is a growing call, even as seen in the Munich conference, for European Union countries to come together to fight the enemy and to be wary amidst this rift in the transatlantic.
Well, I think that there's no question that Europe at this point is trying to find some workaround for the United States of America in all spheres. That includes economic, but it most pointedly is in regard to the nuclear umbrella. The reality is that at this point, there is no substitute for the United States nuclear umbrella and the deterrence. However, with the cracks which have appeared in regard to the Western alliance in NATO, which have largely been occasioned by the Trump administration's approach on Greenland, on tariffs, in terms of whether or not it's willing to go forward under Article 5 of NATO if there is an invasion of a Western European country. So Europe at this point is really on a two-track approach to the nuclear umbrella. One, the present reality is there is no substitute for the United States in regard to deterrence. And so you have these statements coming out that saying that nobody's trying to replace the U.S. umbrella. At the same time, there's a track two going on where you see approaches from the United Kingdom to France in regard to further nuclear cooperation, which indicates that there is an attempt to be able to wean itself away from total reliance on the United States in regard to these matters. And of course, this is the heart of the existential crisis which faces not only Europe but the entire world. Nuclear weapons are an order of magnitude so much greater than what we see in death and destruction in Ukraine now, that it is almost unfathomable. And you have a situation in which not only do you have a bilateral standoff between Russia and the United States in regard to the way forward in regard to nuclear weapons, but you have a rapidly increasing power in China, and then not to mention the fact that India and Pakistan are both nuclear armed at this point, and probably Israel is in a non-public kind of way. So this is an existential challenge, not only in terms of the United States and Europe versus Russia, but how the whole world will be able to come to grips with the new reality of nuclear proliferation, because it is the case that there has never been a weapon invented in the world which has not been used by mankind. And the problem is, of course, with nuclear weapons, mankind itself is at hazard if there should be an outbreak of nuclear hostilities. So it's a very serious situation. And you see individual nations, UK and France and others, trying to find a way forward in the absence of leadership from the United States of America based upon strategy, partnership, and principle.
Right, Mr. Vikri, thanks very much for that comment and your perspective. Viewers, in fact, let's also tell you that the 62nd Munich Security Conference that's currently underway with over 60 heads of state, 65 foreign ministers, more than 30 defense ministers in attendance. Leaders from more than 40 international organizations are present as the world faces escalating instability and conflicts. While the 62nd Munich conference is underway, a massive demonstration has gathered 200,000 people denouncing the Iranian government. The protesters rallying at Theresienwiese are condemning Iran's leadership following the deadly crackdown on nationwide protests in January. All right, Mr. Vikri requested to join us back here. There is a mounting pressure on Iranian regimes, but doesn't look like it's ready to bow down because it's not just US that it is trying to wade off its backyard. There's also Netanyahu and Israel that are posing a concern for Iran particularly, and Netanyahu has clear opposition to Iran augmenting its missile program.
Well, thanks very much for allowing me to comment on this. It seems to me that the demonstrations at the Munich Security Conference against Iran, which now involve as much as hundreds of thousands of people, show that peace is inseparable. You do not have in today's world an approach which allows you to deal with the Iranian problem in a vacuum, in separation from world peace. So the idea that the United States is going to move in two carriers and is going to somehow, in a fell swoop kind of transaction, be able to solve the Iranian problem is absolutely wrong. Once again, it requires strategy, it requires partners, it requires principles in order to be able to do this. Unfortunately, our President Trump has abdicated a position as leader of the free world in favor of a transactional approach which was suitable to his purposes as a real estate developer. We have to get back to developing relationships so that a problem such as Iran can be ameliorated, if not solved, by common cooperative action. And at this point, that's not in the cards. President Trump seems to be willing to deal with President Netanyahu, but as far as having a coordinated partnership approach, that's been thrown out the window. So it's a very difficult situation in Iran, as it is in many other parts of the world today.
Right, Mr. Vikri, thanks very much for your comments here. And viewers, we now move on. Now, France is saying that some G7 countries are prepared to move ahead with a ban on maritime services linked to Russian oil exports as discussions continue on tightening sanctions against Moscow. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot said several members of the group of 7 have expressed willingness to advance the measure, though no final agreement has yet been reached. Speaking to reporters after a G7 foreign ministers meeting in Munich, Barrot said France hopes the proposal can be included in the European Union's upcoming sanctions round. The proposed ban would further restrict services such as shipping, insurance and logistics tied to Russian oil exports, building on existing sanctions imposed since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. European Union officials say discussions among G7 partners are continuing as pressure mounts to curb Russia's energy revenues. Let's now invite Matthew Wadham, American journalist, in the discussion here. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Matthew, we've been seeing plenty of sanctions on Russia from Europe and the West. How much do you really think that is a trouble for Russia, if at all anymore?
Well, yeah, the noose is tightening on Russia, and financial support for its war effort in Ukraine is drying up. These efforts to ban the transportation of Russian oil are definitely going to hurt Russia, which needs to sell oil desperately to support to pay for government operations, including the war in Ukraine. And now, as you know, India recently agreed with President Trump's proposal to stop buying oil from Russia, and that too is things like this are going to hurt Russia for sure. They may make a difference.
All right, Matthew, thanks for your comment here. And viewers, we are now going to proceed. Now, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also announced that the country will deploy its carrier strike group to the North Atlantic and High North later this year. The mission will be led by the Royal Navy's flagship HMS Prince of Wales and will involve NATO allies, including the US and Canada. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Starmer emphasized the deployment as a powerful demonstration of NATO unity and the UK's strong commitment to Euro-Atlantic security. The Munich Security Conference, which started on February 13, has gathered over 70 heads of state and more than 140 ministers, focusing on global security challenges. Let's listen in to what UK Prime Minister said.
I can announce today that the UK will deploy our carrier strike group to the North Atlantic and the High North this year, led by HMS Prince of Wales, operating alongside the US, Canada, and other NATO allies, in a powerful show of our commitment to Euro-Atlantic security.
And moving on now, Grok, the AI chatbot developed by Elon Musk's startup, has expanded its footprint in the US, even as it faces global criticism and regulatory scrutiny. Data from Apptopia shows Grok's US market share rose to 17.8% last month, up from 14% in December and 1.9% in January 2025. The growth has made Grok the third most used chatbot in the country, behind OpenAI's ChatGPT and Google Gemini. Analysts attribute the rise largely to Grok's integration into X, where it is promoted and bundled with paid subscriptions. The gains come as XAI continues heavy spending to scale infrastructure, despite operating at a loss, and follows its recent acquisition of SpaceX, which Reuters has reported valued XAI at about $250 billion. However, Grok remains under scrutiny after being used to generate non-consensual sexualized images, triggering investigations in several countries. X and XAI have not commented. And we also will wrap up this edition of the World Report. Keep watching NewsX World.